What if I told you that there was one scale that had 7 scales? Let's take a look. Now everybody's familiar with the major scale. It's one of the first scales that a lot of people learn, and it's kind of the backbone of Western music. The major scale goes a lot deeper than just the major scale. So that's what we're talking about today. We're going to be discussing modes. So if we take our C major scale, for example, it's got an interval pattern of whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. That is how many half and whole steps it takes to complete said C major scale. We can also look at that as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, because at this point we're kind of at the main scale for music and we haven't incorporated any sharps or flats. So at this point we know that our root note is going to be C, hence the C major scale. But what happens if we start and end, say, on the D of this scale, on the second? So we're going to end up with a different sequence of notes. Although they're the same notes, it's going to sound different because it is in a different position from the rest of the notes. And this is what a mode is. This would be considered the Dorian mode. Now you can do this same thing off of every note in the major scale. Therefore there are 7 modes of the major scale because there are 7 notes. And those modes are as follows. So the first one is going to be Ionian, or major as we know it. The second is Dorian. The third is Phrygian. The fourth is Lydian. The fifth is Mixolydian. The sixth is Aeolian or minor. And the seventh is Locrian. From those demonstrations, you can hear that every mode has a pretty unique sound from the next. And there's a very good reason for that. Basically, the reason that all the modes sound unique from the next, even though it's all the same notes, is because of the order of the notes. What do I mean by that? So when we're talking about modes, we're really talking about 3 different categories of modes. And those are major sounding modes, minor sounding modes, and then diminished sounding modes, which is basically just the Locrian mode. Now under our major sounding modes, we have our Ionian or major scale, of course, and we have our Lydian and our Mixolydian modes. And that correlates to our 1, our 4, and our 5 mode. Then on our minor sounding side, we have our Dorian, our Phrygian, and our Aeolian or minor scale. And those correlate to our 2, our 3, and our 6 mode. Now if you guys watched a couple of my videos on chords, such as, the chords of the major scale, or the Nashville numbers video, you might see some of these numbers on the screen and be like, hey, wait a minute, those look familiar. There's a good reason for that. It's because they are familiar. So basically, the difference between the major sounding modes and the minor sounding modes, but the major and the minor have either a major third or a minor third. So in the same way that we talk about our chords, our 1, 4, 5 chords are going to be major, our 1, 4, 5 modes are going to be major. And a couple of the notes are going to be a little bit different in there, but the basic structure is still there. So you have a root, you have a major third, and you have a fifth, perfect fifth. In the minor category, you've got a root, you've got a minor third, and you've got a perfect fifth. And that is kind of how these things correlate between, modes of the major scale and creating chords. Now I can hear you asking already, Chris, how is it that we can use the same notes in essentially what's the same pattern and get such a different sound out of it? Well, I'm going to explain that to you real quick. Alright, so let's use F Lydian for this example, and F Lydian has the notes F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F. Again, it's the same notes as C major, but we're just starting on a different note and ending on that same note. Now when we compare modes to a major scale, we do not compare it to the parent scale from which we derived the mode. So basically, in this instance, even though we have the exact same notes as C major, we would not compare that to C major. They are, for all intents and purposes, completely different scales at this point. Now what we would compare it to get our intervals and, you know, our sharps and flats, is we would compare it to F major. Now when we compare F Lydian to F major, you'll see that we have a pretty good match except for an augmented fourth, which means that the fourth is sharpened basically. Now I think this video has gone on long enough, so I'm not going to talk about every single difference of all the modes, but here is a chart so that you can review it and kind of understand the differences between those modes and their major counterparts. Now it's important to note that you might see some sharps or flats on the chart, but those do not necessarily mean that the note that you're playing is going to be sharp or flat. It's just talking about the interval. So a good example is any of the C major modes. They're going to have, you know, a sharp 4 or a flat 3, that kind of thing, but none of them have any flat or sharp notes in them. Hopefully that didn't muddy the waters too much. Now that we have an understanding of the modes, let's talk about using the modes. Now the easy part is going to be practicing them, because all you're doing is playing the major scale, but you're starting at a different point. So once you get that in your head and you start practicing these, it's really not that big of a deal to start practicing from the second and ending on the second, getting a feel for, you know, how it sounds, practicing your ear training, and then you can use them in different songs and things like that. Now the beauty of having these in your toolbox is that you can bust them out whenever you need to have a, you know, a more favorable or a fresher sound. Now, for example, if you're creating a dad rock song, as you do, and you wanted to use something other than a minor scale to create a solo or something like that, you could bust out one of the other two minor sounding modes and use it in its place, and it'll kind of... Now in the future, I do plan on going more in depth on these one by one, so stay tuned for that. That'll hopefully clear up some more about these, you know, mysterious modes. Hopefully you learned something from this video. If you did, please leave a like, subscribe to stay tuned for more in the future, and share this with a friend who you think would benefit from this video. Also, I have a webpage now, www.spurmusicco.com. Please check it out. I've got merchandise right now. I'm working on blog posts and other things. We're also on Facebook and Instagram, so please check us out there. And as always, thank you for watching. Have a great day. I just want to say that I started recording this video when it was light out.